Welcome back to the Hill of Roses, where we come once again to celebrate the best contributors to our independent policy movement for progress to bring power to people like you. Today on the program, we're going to get to talk to Matt Skidmore of The Matt Skidmore Show. You may know him from his recounting of the entire Yang presidential run in 2020 as a frequent live streamer and documentarian of his campaign, as well as his continued advocacy for the Yang Gang movement and their down ballot candidates after the campaign as well. In this episode, we got to talk to Matt about his journey into politics and what it was like trying to document the Yang campaign, some of his favorite moments from the campaign, how he defines his own politics in relation to Yang as well as other candidates. And we also got to talk about what do we as a Yang Gang movement need to be doing? What are some of our strengths and weaknesses from a year ago? And what are some of the biggest activities we need to focus on to be properly organized to continue growing in the years to come? So this was a really exciting conversation. Frankly, I always love getting to talk to Matt because I find it's very interesting when you get to talk to people who are trying to get very actively engaged, trying to focus tactically on how to do it, and have a political ideology that is a little bit more heterodox, like a lot of Americans out there. So I know I enjoyed today's conversation, and I know you are too. So let's get into it. Okay, we're here with Matt Skidmore from the Matt Skidmore Show. You might have known him in the past from the Zach and Matt Show, but it's been a while since we got to last talk with him on his program, and it's so great to be able to have him on. Matt, welcome to the program.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me on today. Excited to talk with you.
You're very welcome. And so, Matt, in this first part of our conversation, I really wanted to just focus in on yourself. I think a lot of people, when they get to hear you, they get to know a lot about Andrew Yang, but I think a lot of people want to know a little bit more about Matt Skidmore. And so my first question to you, Matt, is just when did you first kind of get yourself involved in politics? Was Andrew Yang that first spark that said, I want to get interested in politics a little bit? Or were there anything beforehand that kind of led you into that space?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. Andrew definitely wasn't my first foray into politics, but he was probably like the first politician or somebody in politics that I actually looked up at and was like, this is my guy. Like, this is who I want to follow. I agree with this man. But like going back, I mean, I'm admittedly very young, 21 years old, so I can only say I've been into politics so long. But I always kind of had a general interest in it, like going back to when I was like 12, 13 years old. I remember in high school, I took AP government, and ironically, that's like the best class I ever did in high school. Like I nailed the test, and I don't think that was necessarily because of anything besides the fact it was just something I actually found genuinely interesting, which you don't see that too often in school these days, unfortunately, with the current education system. But I would say like my views, like at a younger age, they're very like you have zero life experience. I still don't have any life experience, so like my views have been kind of changing a bit over time. And I'd say like when I first started getting like more seriously into politics, it was actually when Trump first got elected, because I remember during the primary and just being like, what the hell is going on? Like, how does Donald Trump have like he's winning state after state after state? And then the Yang though is when I, of course went like all in and did things I never thought I would ever do, like going in Iowa and knocking on doors and all sorts of crazy crap.
So, Matt, could you tell me, like, obviously it must have been a leap of faith to kind of go on the road tour with them. What was the first moment you got to actually film in person of an Andrew Yang event? And what inspired you to go follow him around the country and try and document his campaign?
Yeah, so the first event that I ever saw Andrew was his rally in Philadelphia last September. And I went with Zach, who is formerly part of the Zach and Matt Show, but then he left me, he ditched me. I'm just kidding. He's busy with college, and I decided to change the channel name because I'm tired of waiting for him to return. But I went with him, my older brother, because he also happened to be like Yang Gang, and it was just really cool. We went with our cameras, we recorded everything. I just remember like it felt so like I don't know how to quite describe it. Like it felt so cool to be with this huge group of people that you had never met before that are all like really passionate about this random Asian dude running for president. And I remember like riding up and we're parking and I see people have their cars like decked out, like their windows. It's like YANG. And I'm just like, wow, this is cool. And it was an interesting experience. It was my first ever political event. And we got some good footage and uploaded it. And I remember like my next event after that was, I think I went to Las Vegas and like, was it early November last year maybe? And I dragged Zach along with me. Zach's kind of less like wanted to go out and like get in the thick of it than I did, most likely because of his schoolwork and stuff.
Sure.
But I was all in, and I enjoyed that like a lot. And that was like my first time ever actually live streaming, because we used to just do like set footage, and I found that live streaming so much fun because you get to like you get to bring, it's almost like you get to bring, like if Andrew's having like an event with like 100 people and I have a stream with a few hundred people or even way more, like it's almost like I'm bringing all those people to Yang's event. And like it's really cool. Like I think it was like the coolest, funnest thing ever to go around like live streaming all of Yang's events. And I remember I just got to this point where I missed Yang-a-Palooza because Zach didn't want to go. And I was like, well, I don't want to go all the way out to Iowa. And like, at the time, I didn't know that many people in the Yang gang still, like, so I wasn't comfortable, like, with people, like, you know, it's still a lot of strangers and stuff, whereas now I know a lot of these people. But I remember just seeing all the clips from that, and I decided, like, I'm never missing, like, this stuff again. Like, I just want to go to all the events, and then I just did. Like, I remember I went to Yang's bus tour, his first bus tour in Iowa in early December, and I literally made the decision to go like less than 24 hours before I took my flight to end up Chicago. And then Fred picked me up in his truck and drove together. We drove to Iowa. And it was just because like, it was just one of those things. It's like you're sitting there at like 3 a.m. and you're like, what am I doing with my life? Like, I want to freaking be there. I want to be in the thick of it. I don't want to miss out anymore.
I mean, and frankly, that's the benefit of your youth. If you're not like tied down, you have all the freedom in the world to do that documentation.
Yeah, and that's like another thing. Like I talked to my dad about it. Because I remember coming off the campaign, it was kind of hard to like get back into a normal routine. So I like flipped my life around for at least like 6 months, and then COVID hit and we went on lockdown, and like, so it was just so hard to get back in a rhythm. And I was like having a little trouble with it, to be honest. I remember talking to my dad and he's like, but that, you know, like, Matt, that was like a once in a lifetime experience. Like you wouldn't trade that for like anything. Like, and it's true. Like, it really was like, I don't want to sound like weird because, you know, I'm so young, and I also don't like talking this way in general. I don't know. But basically, it really was like the honor of my life to cover Andrew Yang's campaign. And I hope to do it again if he runs again, you know?
Yeah, no, I certainly feel you on that. And I am very appreciative of your fact that you did that journey, because the point you said before of how you got to bring an extra 100 people on the streams or more just from general viewership seeing the events, I'm certainly one of those. So I'm very thankful that you helped us to get to see more content of that. I'd love to ask you, you know, as you got to go to so many of the events, did you have any particular ones that you thought were your favorite events from the trail?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting question, because my answer for what I think Yang's best event of his entire campaign is not an event that I actually attended. I think it was his LA rally in late September. I think that was his biggest crowd that he had. I think it was his most energetic crowd. I think you saw Yang really feed off the passion and energy of the crowd, and you got to see him in just like this true raw form. Remember, that was the first time that he said, "If Donald Trump's the Rock, if Donald Trump says I'm the effing Rock." And like, it was just so pumped up, so much energy. We were still like, at that point, I think we had like just narrowly like started like making debates. It felt like the momentum was just on our side, and we were so young and so naive. That was the key thing. We were so naive, like looking back on it, like to think like I don't know, we just were inexperienced then, and like knowing what we had to go through later and how hard it would get. Like there were so many great moments on the campaign, but it felt like just that almost like youthful energy that we had was hard hard to beat at that one event. I say personally, the best event like that I went to, so many. To me, like I don't know if there was ever like a real favorite like event that I had to. There was just like a lot that stuck out to me, and one that sticks out to me in particular is when Andrew had an event in like a really rural part of Iowa, and he was actually at a Trump bar. Like we got in there, and it's like a bunch of guys that look exactly what you think the stereotypical like Iowan farmer Trump supporter would look like, all just sitting there like drinking like beers. They recognize like Andrew Yang, and they start like heckling him, and they're all drunk. And Yang has this, it's a very small, like intimate crowd, only like 15, 20 people. And Yang's trying to do a stump speech, and they're like interrupting. And I remember I was filming Yang's thing, and the internet connection was already spotty, and I want my audience to be able to hear. So I went over and decided to start talking. I left the camera and I went over and decided to start talking to the guy who was like the loudest, and with the goal of basically just trying to distract him so he'd be quiet, like for just everybody who was there, both in person and digitally. And I don't know, I ended up just talking to the guy for like 30 minutes, and it was so interesting because he's so, you can just tell he's like so mad and so like angry at the world. Like it's hard to get him to like talk and open up a bit, but as he does, you can just tell like he feels like nobody in Washington like has done anything for him ever, and you can just tell like he's suffering like mentally, financially, spiritually. Like he's someone who really just works all day at this farm that isn't even making money, and then afterwards he goes and drinks at like this bar and like feels miserable. And I don't know, it's interesting having those like real conversations with like voters like that. You know, that's something that doesn't happen online. And I don't know, that I still remember it to this day. Like just like those to me, those are like the type of people that vote like, well, they aren't that guy voted for Donald Trump, he's gonna vote for Trump again. Like just trying to get like inside the mind of like, especially with like, we're filming this the day after the debate, like especially just like with Trump, such like piss poor, like terrible way he acted in last night's debate. Like, and people still go like, how can somebody vote for this guy? It's because there's people out there that are like so desperate and feel so downtrodden that they're almost willing to believe like anything someone says, as long as they feel like that person's fighting for them, even if it's not true. So I don't know. It's just interesting to me.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of value, frankly, from those like rally style events. Because I think, and you're probably certainly aware from getting to document it so many times, the rallies often kind of hit that same stump speech over and over. And you've heard it. It's a good stump speech, but you don't get a lot of new experience from that. And I think these smaller venues allowing you to have more personal conversations stick out, because I think you learn something new. And I think one thing I'd love to ask you is like, obviously, you said the first politician you were gravitating to was Andrew Yang, but I'd love to hear how you, in general, try to define your own politics and like evolve over time. Because obviously, you're not going to agree probably with 100% of what Yang said, and he obviously accepts that. He encourages people. We're not all going to agree all the time. How do you try and define your politics now, especially like post Yang 2020 era?
Yeah, that's another good question. Personally, like I think my political views have always been like a bit confusing to other people, because I think I hold some views that people would say like are like perhaps mainstream like right views, but then I hold a lot of views that are also like some people would call like radical left, like socialist views. So like kind of all over the spectrum. Whenever I would take like those I side with quizzes, it used to always put me like pretty much just to the right of center, like every single time. And then I retook it for the first time in like 10 months recently, and apparently I'm now like center left. Like I apparently moved, and that was like the first time ever, because I literally remember taking this test like 5 years ago, back before the last election, you know what I mean? And so I think like part of the thing to do with that is like I think what we've seen like with the pandemic and stuff. I think like on healthcare, for example, I never really knew like where I sat, just because I'm so young and I haven't had much experience with the healthcare system because of Obamacare. I'm on my parents' plan anyway till I'm 26, which is nice. So don't take away our Obamacare.
Yeah, I just faced that. Take away Obamacare, and I no longer have healthcare right now. So,
but like I think like one thing that hit me on like I think like with the pandemic, I've just realized like more and more how like immoral it is for people to not be able to get care just because they simply can't afford it. And like I think like I don't know even if like my views have necessarily changed that much of the past year. As more of like my view on healthcare has now become like more fully formed, and I've finally like committed to like I'm still not on for like banning all of private insurance, like, but I'm definitely on board with like Medicare for all. Like, we need a universal plan that everybody can get, and it probably should be free. I don't know how you pay for it though, but somebody smarter than that can answer, or somebody smarter than me can answer that question. But like, this specific example is interesting. My I had a friend recently who had been dealing with some like mental issues, like mental troubles. And that's very common with like the era we're in and the times we're in. And I remember asking them like, have you gotten like seen therapy? Like, have you gotten help? Like, personally, I've had some things in my life, like when I was 10 years old, my parents split up. And that was like, I was just transferring schools. And I remember at the time that was something that was like very difficult for me to handle. And my mom decided to put me in therapies. And I hated it at the time, but I think overall, like, it was good for me. So like, I know the value of these types of things. And I told my friend, like, have you considered going to therapy? And he's like, no, I don't want to because I can't afford it. And I just remember thinking to me, like myself, I was like it really hit me in that moment. I was like, this is what so many people are facing. Like,
Yeah,
they're just refusing to take care of themselves because of money or like this or that. And so I don't know. Like I going like on broader political, like just back to the general political stuff. There's definitely like I'm all over on the spectrum. Like I'm someone who would say I would consider myself to be like pro-life. Uh, but at the same time, like I know it's a very complex issue, and like right wingers try to make it out like, oh, people on the left are like getting abortions like willy nilly. It's like, no, it's actually like most cases, it's a very, very tough decision for the woman, and like it's not that simple. And I also like I think like most Republicans are complete hypocrites because they just have all these views that like they say they're pro-life, but then they have all these views that go against that, in my opinion. Like, for example, they say it's like okay for people to get shot if they like don't listen to the police. Like, that to me is not that pro-life.
Yeah.
So we're kind of I'm throwing things around, like, but like, well, here's one thing. I disagree with Yang on packing the Supreme Court. Like I think though, if anybody were to do it, that would probably do it the right way, it would be Yang, because he'd come up with some way to do it that would be more fair. But overall, I just see like that as something where it would like every single time we change power, Republican or Democrat, they would just keep stacking justices on, and it would just never end. It would delegitimize the court. And like another thing is on um censorship of social media, like in terms of like big tech and the government. Yang's someone who says like we need like Facebook, for example, to be like fact checking ads and stuff like that. And I disagree, because I just think that Facebook and like the government shouldn't be in like the positions to decide like what's true and what's not. And that's not to say that the issue of like misinformation and fake news isn't a huge issue, but because it is, I just disagree with Yang's approach to it. So I don't know. Those are a few things. I kind of went all over the place.
I mean, I think partially what I'm kind of hearing from this is you're a little bit like a lot of Americans. They're a little bit heterodox in thinking. And that kind of, this is one of the big appeals of Yang's campaign and saying like not right, not left, but forward, is it's kind of like this non-ideological approach to politics. It's looking at each issue at a time and trying to come to some determination, compared to just saying, does this fit in my conservative ideology? Does this fit in my liberal ideology, my democratic socialist ideology? Yes or no? Okay, let's go that way. And I think I can relate to that too. You know, pro-life is a perfectly good example. I think we should be reducing abortion, but not restricting it. I think that is a perfectly logical stance. If you want to be pro-life and help women bring more children into the world, let's have universal health care. So it's not $9,000 just to have a kid. If you're radically sick and you have to get in an ambulance, that shouldn't cost you $5,000 for an ambulance ride. Like, let's help keep people alive. And at the same time, I'm pro-choice, because I think that is also pro-freedom. And at the end of the day, these are tough conversations for women to have. It's not something willy-nilly done. and we could go into other issues like guns or immigration. I certainly will still define myself as left wing, probably more center left now compared to the start of the campaign. But I can relate to you. I think we need a lot more non-ideological kind of mixed view opinions in our political spectrum.
Yeah. Well, I will say, like, in the current political climate we're in, just as a country in general, we're so polarized. So naturally, people tend to head for like one extreme or the other. And you see this all the time in like media, and like if you're watching conservative media versus you're watching liberal media. And I think like a lot of times on a lot of these issues, they're a lot more complex than people would make them. Like I'd say like the political actors on both sides, they're a lot more complex than these people try to make them. And it's always like they try to make it black or white when it seems to me like a lot of times it's a gray area. So
yeah, I totally
that's what I
agree
like.
with you.
That's what I like about the Yang Gang, though, is it seems that we have a lot of that. And like it seems like it's very normal in the Yang Gang to find somebody who like has weird opinions that you just don't see like in the like you wouldn't see it in the CNN profile of like what a voter looks like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's very true, especially because we've developed this kind of very open environment for people to have a lot of ideologically different conversations with each other. And I think that helps us grow, frankly, and learn more. I think that's definitely contributed to my own evolution on politics. And I think we do get a lot of this, out there in the web or even in these long form podcasts, because unlike what you see in the media, we're not just relying on quick sound bites. We are allowing people to expand their thoughts as long as they'd like to desire. And I think that's super important. But with that being said, I think this is a good point for us to take a break in part one and come back to part two, because we've certainly got to hear a lot more about who you are. I think it's time that we have a conversation about the Yang Gang movement and what going forward is going to look like. So everyone, join us in part two, where we talk with Matt about what's next for the Yang Gang. Okay, we're back here with Matt Skidmore. We just had our lovely part one conversation, getting to know a little bit more about him, but it's now that we get to talk about the movement in general. And so, Matt, we got to talk about your own evolution and your experience cataloging the Yang campaign. I'd love to ask you, how do you feel the Yang Gang has changed in the past year? Do you feel like there has been any like specific growths that we've had, specific areas where we've weakened? How do you feel like we've changed so far as a movement?
It's a good question. I think since the campaign ended, I think there's been like a lot of concerns, a lot of worry about what kind of direction the Yang Gang's been taking. But I think like overall, like when you look at everything that's happened since the end of the campaign, the fact that it was unfortunate it had to take a pandemic, but just the fact that UBI became this like mainstream idea that now people no longer view as crazy. It's now like whether the question isn't now like it's like not whether we should do it now. It's like people are like, or sorry, it's not if we should do it. It's when we're gonna do it. And like Yang with getting the Democratic primary reinstated in New York, and Jermaine Johnson's win in South Carolina against like a 20-year incumbent. We have a lot of congressional candidates that have won primaries, like David Kim and Blair Walsingham and Donna Imam and Marilyn Strickland, and I'm missing probably so many others. And if you look at if you just compare that to like the fact that usually like the incumbent wins like 90+% of the time, like it seems like we're winning like way above that rate. So it seems like we're doing well, like just as a movement. Now internally, like the internal dynamics, it does seem like a lot of people, and this seems natural almost, like this is the way I describe it to people is I feel like 75% of the Yang Gang that like was on Twitter and like on Reddit and on YouTube that was really active during the campaign, those people are normal. They have gone back to their normal lives.
Yeah.
Everybody remaining, and this includes us here, me and you, we're insane. We're crazy. Yeah. And that's why we're still around. And we happen to be like the people that are the most passionate and the most like into this thing, which is obviously why we're still here. And we all have very strong opinions about what type of shape the movement should, or what type of form the movement should take, what direction it should go. And it seems like there has been a lot of like people kind of maybe returning to like their pre-Yang Gang like tribes a bit, and things have just become like a little more there's less seems to be less uniting us these days. But I will say that the moment that Andrew does anything that's huge, like a huge catalyst, like of something, whether it's he runs for something again or like a bill, UBI bill, I have no clue what it could end up being, but it's going to bring us all back together. And we kind of already saw that with the hashtag uh was it let Yang speak DNC or something like that, where they left him out of the debate and suddenly like, or out of the convention. And we all just instantly came together out of nowhere, trended like #2 in the US, and miraculously they appear to have perhaps paid some attention to us, and we got Yang in. So that was like to me, that I remember that night it felt like, to me, a little bit at the end, it was like we're all back together, like we're all still in this. And I love when it's interesting on like Twitter when you see people attack like Yang. It seems like on Twitter, and you've talked about this on your Twitter. I know not everybody on YouTube is tuned into like the Twitter drama and everything that's going on.
Caught in, yeah.
So I don't want to get too caught in, but like just every single week, like someone likes to just post like screw Andrew Yang, he's the worst person ever. And it's not like a righty person, it's saying it's like a lefty, like Dem. And the Yang Gang always unites to attack them, all the different factions. So I don't know, I think a lot of it is just noise, and goes back to the fact that again, it's like the craziest of us that are left. But I think everybody will come back and reunite at some point.
Yeah,
I think like overall as a movement, we do have to realize we are actually doing pretty good, like realistically speaking.
Yeah, I generally echo those sentiments. I think we are certainly getting a lot more W's on the board and kind of maturing as a movement. But I think you're absolutely right that we're a little bit fragmented, because you're going to have the passionate, plugged-in people, because there are some people who do care about down-ballot races and continuing to advocate for policy. But then there are a lot of normie people who show up for a primary and, you know, the top of the ticket items, and then they start going back to their normal camps over time, or just check that altogether. So I think it's like, you're right. We should acknowledge that we are doing well, but I think we need to be doing more to kind of get all these parts that are now kind of disengaging or separated, kind of plugged in on some form of an activity. I'd love to ask you, you know, how have you felt about like Yang's own management post-campaign? Obviously, he's had certain moves like founding Humanity Forward and doing the direct stimulus, as well as supporting the candidates. He's had the CNN, and he's certainly been trying to have a role in the Biden administration and has been trying to be a surrogate for him. How have you felt about his job post-campaign? Has that increased your opinion of him? Has it kept it the same? How have you been feeling about how he's done?
It's funny. I saw your poll on this earlier. I voted that my opinion of Yang is the same, and I already had a very high opinion of Yang, so I still have a high opinion of Yang. And I think just pretty much everything that he's done since the end of the campaign, I know a lot of people will disagree with this, and I'll try to explain why I don't in a minute. I think he's done nearly everything right. I think he's nearly made all the right moves. I know a lot of people say like he's like become an insider, or he's like selling out to the Democratic establishment. And I just like, to me, I just have to ask, like, would you rather Yang like be on the outside right now, nobody taking him seriously, he not on CNN getting a voice right after presidential debates with millions of people watching to give his opinion? Like, would we rather him unfortunately be like someone like Tulsi Gabbard, who's been extricated from the Democratic Party? I don't think like deep down that Andrew Yang thinks like Joe Biden is the next coming of like the great progressive champion of humanity first and UBI rain down. But like the idea that like Yang is gonna just every time Joe Biden does something slightly wrong, that Yang's gonna be like, oh, Joe Biden bad, like that would just, there's no political, people don't like it, but it's politics. There's no like political strategy in which that would be a good thing, because it is so much better to have Yang on the inside, which it looks like he actually would be in a Biden administration, than sitting on the outside like a loser with no voice, no influence, and the media taking him not seriously at all. It's a complete 180 from how the media is taking Andrew Yang right now than how they were during the campaign. And I know a lot of people would say, well, if he ran again, they're gonna go back to not taking him seriously again. I really don't know. I really don't know. I think Yang's gaining a lot of credibility right now. I think people see him as someone who's pushing, again, whether you like it or not. I know most people on the Hill of Roses are probably not down with Biden, but voting for Biden. Like people see him as like this great cheerleader. And I remember I watched this clip on MSNBC maybe back over the summer where someone who was like establishment, like one of these like white randos on MSNBC that nobody knows their name, but they go to them for analysis every time because they have like former Clinton administration in their title or whatever the heck it is. And this person was saying, and this is back over the summer, like before Yang's DNC speech and everything, they're like, Andrew Yang is a top 3 surrogate for Joe Biden. And that to me stuck out, like top 3. Wow. Andrew Yang's a top 3 surrogate for Joe Biden. That's crazy. Like, I think Yang's really doing almost everything he can do right. And there's some supporters, though, that just they can't stand the fact that, like, at times it seems like he's just like shilling for the Democratic Party. But I mean, it's like, if he weren't doing what he were doing, he wouldn't have a voice. And you just have to trust that Andrew's the same guy that he was back during the campaign, that he's still the same guy, that he's not going to get sucked into the DC swamp mess. He's not going to become his friend that went to DC and said he was never going to be a lobbyist, became a lobbyist. I remember there was this episode of Yang Speaks back in the spring, too, where I remember Andrew was saying, he was talking to Zach Grauman, he was like, yeah, Zach, I remember like telling you back during the campaign, if I ever sounded like one of them, to start slapping me or something. Like, so to me, like Andrew is someone who's smart. He's very introspective. I think he like analyzes his own behavior a lot and like tries not to like let too much like outside crap influence his opinion. Like, I think Andrew just stays true to himself most of the time, and you got to just trust his judgment on this kind of thing.
Yeah, I largely agree with you. And I think my overall opinion of Yang, frankly, has increased since the campaign. Because, I think being that he didn't have a track record in politics beforehand, I did have some concerns that whenever the campaign could end, potentially he would just go back to his normal life. He would go back to Venture for America. He would go back to spending more time with his kids. But he's kind of doubled down and really tried to continue getting the message out there. I was originally kind of skeptical around CNN, and I think largely a lot of people have reason to be skeptical of mainstream media in general and their quality. But I think it was kind of smart in what he's doing and even getting involved in the Biden campaign because it
was so smart, John. It was so smart. Andrew got to speak to millions of people after Super Tuesday, after the New Hampshire, after Nevada primary. Yeah. After the South Carolina primary, he got to do analysis after every single night of the Democratic convention, where it's really like hardcore base of the Democratic Party watching, and they get to see this genius dude, Andrew Yang, up on the screen. They get to see him last night after the presidential debate. How many millions of people were watching that? Like, it was such a smart move for Yang to join CNN.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree with you. And I think it's also good because, as I was saying before, it hits the base that we didn't have before. And I think a lot of his moves of trying to go inside largely are to cover some of the base, weaknesses that we had during the campaign. We struggled with older voters. It's just a key. We struggled with people who valued the experience. Well, guess what? He's trying to work with Joe Biden so he gets a, secretary or some admin spot so he can have political experience on the board. He's trying to get with, frankly, a lot more black voters, too. I think that has been a big thing that he's been trying to push. And I think on top of that, my only concerns, which I'm curious to hear how you think, is like, I feel like there's been, certainly with Humanity Forward, they've been doing these cash outreaches. They've been getting people on platforms like CNN, bringing guests onto a show. But I don't feel like there's been as much organizing to kind of build the grassroots network and help like these Humanity First movements and, provide as much support, like infrastructure wise, to down ballot candidates. How have you felt about Yang in that approach? Like, is there anything you would like to like advise to him if you could have his ear in terms of the movement?
That's actually I agree with you actually on that last point. I do think Andrew could do more to try to help develop like the grassroots side of the movement. Like I think like we have these organizations like here at the Hill of Roses. We have other ones like Humanity First movement and Math movement where they have like a hardcore dedicated base of volunteers. And I was actually talking to some folks from Humanity First movement the other day, and they're asking me like, Matt, what do you think we could do to help get like more dedicated like super volunteers? And I was like ultimately like it would take like people like I can like me for example, like I have a decent like not decent I have a pretty big Twitter account for like Yang Gang, and I can tweet out like all day about like phone banking over and over and over again.
Yeah.
But people ultimately like one person might sign up and they'll do it that time and never again. But that's not going to get people to become what like unfortunately these grassroots campaigns and grassroots movements really need, which is infrastructure. Like people that are willing like every single week to phone bank for 3 or 5 or even who knows how many hours. They're willing to make like graphics and do outreach and all the different stuff that goes on behind the scenes that like if you're just paying attention on like Twitter or like YouTube, you don't ever see this kind of stuff that's going on. And I think like ultimately, it would take like Andrew and the team at Humanity Forward like really, really pushing, like saying like almost like Andrew getting in front of like the camera and talking for like 30 minutes about like why it's so important to build like a grassroots organization or I don't know, like some creative way to get like more of these like really dedicated volunteers. So I agree with you. I don't they just to me it's like it's something that can really only the best way for it to blossom fully, this grassroots organization, would be for them to get involved in some way, and just not in terms of even having to manage it, just in terms of promoting it and letting people know that this exists. There's a community out there of like-minded people who really support like policies that you care about, and you can go on with them and work with them, and you'll feel welcomed. You'll feel part of something. You'll get some meaning and purpose out of it because it feels good to fight for what you believe in. But people like they have to know it's there, and like they have to have Andrew nudge them along because Andrew's the boss. Andrew's the leader. He's the leader of our cult. Just kidding. We're not a cult. We're not a cult. If we were a cult, more people would. If we were a cult, more people would not be like voting third party or even some for Trump. So.
Yeah, I think that's probably what like maybe 25% of the Yang Gang. I think we got like 75% on board. But I think in general, to your point about
I'm in that 25. I'm voting third party. But I live in Maryland. We're going blue. I can't be held hostage.
See, I never try to shame people like that. I don't shame people in general. And I'd love to hear like just your thoughts on that. But before that, I just want to make a quick plug because we here at the Hill of Roses are doing, as you say, we're doing phone banking each week in October, trying to help you get the down ballot. And we've decided so far the people we're going to support is Adam Christensen in Florida's 3rd. We're going to be supporting Donna Imam in Texas's 31st. We're going to be supporting David Kim in California's 34th district. And then we're going to be supporting Paula Jean Swearigan in the U.S. Senate race in West Virginia. So, yeah, we want to get people to come on board and phone bank with us. So join the Hill of Roses Discord and you could be able to get involved in that activity. But
Discord, do you guys, everyone watching, do you realize what that means? That is like a 24/7 interactive chat. You could just hang out with John, all the other cool people on the Hill of Roses. It's a community, and you got to do cool stuff like phone bank for stuff you believe in. And if you're nervous or you're shy, I'm nervous, I'm shy. John is not nervous and shy, so he's going to make you just you'll train with him, and it's going to be great.
Oh, it's going to be fun. Honestly, as you said before, it's a very rewarding feeling knowing you're doing everything you can to help these people. But back to what you were kind of getting at before, you're part of the 25% who aren't in that Biden camp yet. And I wanted to talk to you about, I think this is the last final topic, just like internet dynamics. I think this has been such a major part of the Yang Gang. We've been this kind of more online movement, despite being smaller than some other candidates. We could trend compared to anyone. How do you feel the online dynamic is influencing our politics in general? Do you think the internet has made politics better or worse in general? And how do you try and like keep this philosophy of humanity first alive while interacting on the internet?
has the existence of the internet and social media helped politics? It certainly helped access to information and knowing what the hell's going on, but it has certainly hurt any type of like hope for a civil political discourse where people can be anonymous online and just say things that they would never say to like another person's face. So I like personally, I actually think social media is like very unhealthy. But I am on it all day anyway because well, I guess people don't always make the best decisions. So for their for their health. So but it's interesting, like in terms of just like the greater point of like not being able to get on board with Joe Biden. It's interesting. I'm so honestly so close because I really can't stand Trump, and I'll tell you like what's really worrying about me, and I was thinking about it a lot just last night and this morning is like I'm really scared for the election, like, and I'll tell you why, because Donald Trump has been now saying for months and months and months that this mail-in ballot process is just going to be an absolute like disaster. He's been delegitimizing it, saying it's like full of fraud. During the debate last night, he's saying like ballots were found in like rivers and all sorts of stuff. And I'm not even someone who thinks like mail-in ballots are perfect. Like I'm like, because to me, it's like Trump says they're the worst thing ever. Democrats say they're the best thing ever. I think like they're probably like pretty good, but there's definitely some flaws, and there's like legitimate criticisms, like the fact that some mail-in ballots won't even be able to get counted till election day, which is going to lead into this next thing that I'm talking about. Is basically we're in a scenario right now, and the polling confirms the hell out of this, where right now there's such a partisan split on mail-in ballots versus the in-person vote. We could be in a scenario, I think one of the recent polls showed it's like 65% of Democrats plan on voting by mail and only 35% in person. It's like the complete opposite for Republicans.
Red mirage.
It's 65% for Republicans in person, 35% by mail. We could be in a scenario where on election night, the election day vote, where Trump is up by like 10 points in Michigan, Pennsylvania, all the swing states. He's somehow ahead in like Colorado and Virginia and like Nevada and all this crazy crap. And Trump's going to declare victory and all this other crap and say like, I knew it. And then as slowly as the Democratic mail-in ballots start coming in, his lead could just slowly start trickling away. And if it ends up where by the end of the counting that Joe Biden has the lead, Trump has been doing everything he can for the past few months to cast so much doubt over that result, because he will say it was fraud. They harvested ballots, and like it doesn't even matter to me like whether the process, like at the end of the day, like I don't know whether there's going to be, I don't think there's going to be any like massive fraud. I think there will be definitely some issues that we're going to just see because we've never done something like this before. But like it's very scary scenario. And like I see it where like last night Trump tells at the debate, he's asked to condemn white supremacy and he doesn't. And he says like, Proud Boys, stand back and stand by. Stand by for what? This election scenario that you've been setting up for months, where the Democrats are going to steal your election, and then your supporters that you're telling to stand by, they're going to come out with their guns. And like it's really scary to me. And I don't know, it makes me like almost want to like this everything that I like the whole basically going into the whole primary, I was always like, basically, I'm Yang or Tulsi, or I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm probably not going to vote for who the Democratic nominee was. I was like one of those 42%. And it's just because like there's a lot of issues that I have with Joe Biden's policy, just like I do with Trump. Yeah. And I guess I'm fortunate enough in this blue state where I don't have to really make a choice, but it really is pushing me like. Last night was just truly awful. It really was.
It truly was a shit show. And, I think, frankly, the point you made is one of the biggest reasons I'm going to be voting for Joe Biden, despite living in a blue state. Like, I live in New York.
Yeah.
In 2016, I voted green. This year, I'm thinking about voting blue because, frankly, he's tried to delegitimize this election so much to the point in which he said the only way we're going to lose is if the Democrats cheat. Like, he's literally on the record saying there's no way I can lose unless they cheat. And when asked to say, will you try and make sure that you don't signal violence to your supporters if you don't win this election, he refused to make any claims on that. And so I'd like to just bury him so that there's no doubts about like the legitimacy. Even if there's a minor amount of fraud, which I highly doubt in general will be apparent, because it's been what, like 0.0002% to 0.0009% election fraud in the past, even with mail-in voting in high quantities in certain states. So I doubt there's going to be much fraud, but let's beat him by such a margin that there's just no way to even claim it's fraud. And there's certainly other policy areas that I like Joe Biden on, but I agree with you. If you included me in that poll, because that poll came out like, I think in January of this year, I would have not been supporting Joe Biden. If I was polled, I would have been like, yeah, it depends on who the nominee is. And if it was Joe Biden, I probably would not have voted for him. But I think the coronavirus and this issue of electoral integrity has certainly convinced me a little bit more. And, you know, the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the idea that this court seat is going to be a lot more important, have all been factors that have made me a little bit more inclined to come out and support Joe Biden. I'll vote for him. I'm not going to be someone who donates to him. I'm not going to be someone who volunteers for him. I'm going to be someone who's protesting him the day he gets inaugurated. The day after. I'll celebrate the day he's inaugurated and we have a peaceful transition. But the day after that, I'm back to attacking Joe Biden a little bit more frequently. And I encourage everyone out there to take a similar mindset. You got to put the house out off fire before we do some remodeling of the house. And Trump is certainly a fire. But, you know, Matt,
I think you're being too kind with the word fire.
Yeah, it's a blazing inferno. I don't know. We could keep going into hyperboles, but it's bad. It's real bad. But Matt, I want to thank you so much. And I want to just call out. I see you have a sign beforehand. We were talking about so many of the candidates. You got a Blair Walsingham sign behind you?
That's right. That is right. Down in Tennessee's 1st District.
Yeah, we're big fans of Blair here on the program. I have to ask you, you know, how are you feeling about that race dynamic? Because, you know, I've been feeling like, A, it's a shame there hasn't been a debate. The opponent's just a scaredy cat. But, like, how do you feel about these races that they feel insurmountable? I think this is like a comparison to the Yang's campaign. Like, I think most people still recognize that Yang was a long shot. Like, even those that support him would acknowledge that. How do you feel about like how people should focus their times? Because I think Blair is an amazing individual, great policy platform, but this is a district that's been red since the 1800s. Like, how do you try and figure out where you're going to put your focus in balancing between just truly great people versus what we think are these maybe more traditionally competitive races?
Yeah, you know, it's a good question. And it's definitely a balance that has to be maintained because, well, there's so many great people and so many like amazing candidates out there all across the country, which is one of the things that I've found like most fascinating since the end of the campaign is how many amazing people there are out there. But you just, unfortunately, when you're a grassroots movement and you don't have access to corporate dollars and all the other BS that goes along with being an establishment candidate, you have to unfortunately like pick and choose your races. And I think like Justice Democrats and Burners have been kind of good at this in terms of like really targeting entrenched establishment Democrats that have kind of just like forgotten about their districts because they're too busy up in DC in the cool kids club, and they just sneak in there with some person who's just like Jamal Bowman, who was just a principal teacher, or AOC, who was just like a bartender, or Cori Bush, who was just was she like I don't want to say it wrong, was she like a minister?
I think so. I'm not 100%.
I honestly forget, but yeah, I think something to do with that. So it's just like these average community people, and they just sneak in and cause the wave almost that, you know, the Yang Gang wants to create. So it is definitely a tough dynamic. Like there's my kind of thoughts on it are like this. I think at some point you have to remember, like, it's already, if someone's willing to volunteer for a candidate, that's in and of itself like so amazing. Like I wouldn't tell someone like, you're volunteering for the wrong candidate, you're wasting your time. Like No, you are going above and beyond already and doing so much more than so many other people are willing to do. And like, I think it's a good thing to say, like, you know what, you should volunteer, you should donate to the candidate that you like the most. But I do think that you do have to second that, or follow up that like notion with this side, like remembering that you know, we are resource limited and we do have to pick and choose. I'm personally, like, right now my three candidates really are Blair, David, and Donna, but like being like upfront, like no bias, and I'm sure anybody else looking at this would be able to see the same thing. Out of those three, Blair has the biggest uphill battle, of course. Yeah. And but I like David and Donna. They both have amazing shots, and Blair has a shot. It's just not as, just being frank, like not as good as David or Donna's. But I do think it's like a thing, though. You know, one of the things to me that I found interesting with Blair's campaign is, as Yang supporters, back during the campaign, we made this big pitch about how Yang was going to win over all the Trump supporters. Not left, not right, forward, UBI, they're going to effing love it. So if there was like ever a candidate who could win like a super red district in like Appalachia and Eastern Tennessee, it would be a Yang Gang candidate named Blair Walsingham. You know what I mean? So I do think it's like, and it's still an opportunity, and like, I'm definitely gonna keep supporting Blair, and everybody else that I think like embellishes the idea of like moving forward and humanity first and all the other colloquialisms that we repeat.
Yeah, I genuinely agree with that. I think of all people who could be running in that district, I think Blair has an amazing case to be made for why she could win over that district. I think
it is stupid they won't debate.
I know.
In none of these districts.
And, if it weren't for the fact that her opponent has so much corporate money behind her, it was crazy when I checked out the open secrets. I think she could easily pull off an upset because I feel like she has just such the persona to fit this bill of a swing district. But I think at the end of the day, it's like you have different tiers of support level. Like, anytime I can find something and easily share to continue promoting her as a messenger, I'm going to do that for certain. But then there becomes like these scarcity questions, of which the biggest is always time. And so obviously there are certain people that we try to focus in some more resources. And this is the thing. It's not a static thing. If the race continues to trend where Blair continues to improve, I could be right there and trying to help her at that point. But it's just like you have to analyze it case by case. And some groups are going to be able to give time. Some, if you have the resources, you can give resources. But I 100% agree with the thing you said before. Anyone who is volunteering should not be shamed.
Yeah.
Thank you for your work. So many people refuse to do any phone banking.
Yes.
You are a state. And who cares if you're advocating for one candidate or another? You're still helping move the needle on policy, because when you phone bank, if a candidate happens to support our agenda, you're going to end up talking about that a little bit and hopefully change some minds on a national level. And frankly, this is a lesson I think people should take from the Bernie movement, and specifically someone like Cori Bush. Don't be afraid of running again. In fact, do it. Expect it. That is how most people get into office, is they keep trying over time. So I think it's immensely helpful that even if Blair doesn't come up this cycle, I want her to run again. And then we're going to easily give her more support, and she'll have more time if she does it immediately after the election. And again, I'm not saying Blair doesn't have a chance. I just want to make that clear. I love Blair. And I do hope people will encourage her, as well as join us for the other candidates we mentioned we're going to phone bank for. But Matt, it was so great getting to talk to you today, man, about like yourself and your journey through Andrew Yang, and as well what we can be doing to continue to grow this movement. Is there any final thoughts that you wanted to share with the audience, or things that you want them to go check out?
One eternity later.
Yeah, so on Monday, me and Paget Kagi, we are going to actually be doing our own phone banking event with, not with, but for David Kim. We're going to be like tweeting out links to it in the next few days. Like, it's going to be like live streamed on like Twitter, maybe like Twitch or YouTube. And it's really just gonna be like a big Zoom call where we're hoping all of you guys will come in with me and Paget and join and just do like a big like 1 or 2 hour phone banking party, get the word out about David Kim, and hopefully a bunch of new people will see how much fun volunteering is. I mean, there's nothing like getting told to shut up over the phone while you're phone banking. Just kidding. It doesn't happen that often. And
number one tip of phone banking: as quickly as possible, convince them you're a human. Like,
yes,
that's all you got to do. And don't like go into the pre-scripted things. I know every candidate wants you to do that, but do something that is
never
not
follow that.
They'll never fall for it. Be a genuine human being. Surprise them a little bit. Get them where they want to know a little bit more.
This is the way you look at it. How would you want someone to approach you if they were calling you about a candidate you like?
Well, that
never
and
heard
imagine
of
you're old. Also, imagine you're old, because that
and imagine imagine that you have a lot of like busy shit going on in your life. And sure, we'll go from that approach. But anyways, John,
imagine that they're way less political than you are, because that just is also true. So there's a lot of conditions.
You don't even have to speak like that complex about policy, because even if you did, these people wouldn't understand it. You just got to be like, yeah, like David Kim's a great guy. He's an immigration attorney. He wants everybody to have health care and a standard of living, and his opponent takes money from special interests. Goodbye. I don't know. But it's phone banking is one of those things, I think, where it's like once you do it, you're like, oh, why have I been not doing this for the past 6 months? It's really easy. But I want to say, John, I appreciate you having me on and let me talk with your audience. It's always cool to cross collab, and I definitely want to get you back on my channel sometime as well.
I'd love that, Matt. Thank you so much for coming on today. I think there's a lot more collaboration that's coming down the way. We have a lot more movement making to do. So thank you so much, Matt. And I hope everyone will check out your program. Can they still find it by typing in Zach and Matt Show, or do they have to?
Yeah, I'm sure it would work.
Your show?
I think on most platforms it's still like everything's Zach and Matt Show. I just changed like the name, like the title, but like the link and crap, like the ad on Twitter is still Zach and Matt Show. I don't know. It's complicated. I don't really
regularly. Like, do you have a particular production schedule they should check out?
Right now I don't, just because I've been I forget if I talked about this on stream or right before you with you on stream, but I've just been working so much on getting my business that I have. I own a small business selling products online. I've been working really hard over the summer getting that back to where it was before I kind of ditched it for the Yang campaign. So I've just been focused on that. But I will say, like, if anybody like emails me or like DMs me, like usually want to come on, like anybody out there, I'm usually pretty open to it, because I just want to be able to use my platform to like help campaigns and good people who are doing good stuff who need it. So I think I will be. I think next week I'm having on the people who are behind Prop 24 in California.
Oh, very cool.
So that'll be something to look forward to. But yeah, no schedule, unfortunately.
Okay, well, Matt, thank you so much again, and I'll certainly be watching that, as I've enjoyed a lot of your other content. So thank you for coming by today.
Thanks, John. See ya. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much for watching today's episode of The Hill of Roses. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you did, please let us know by subscribing to our channel, liking today's video, and sharing the video with your friends. Also, if you want to be notified, please make sure you hit the bell when you subscribe. Finally, if you want to find more of our network's content, please go to thehillofroses.com. With that being said, we love y'all for helping the movement grow, and we hope you're staying rosy out there.